Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Trim here. We're going to do something a little bit different today. I figured I would bring you a zombie deck profile of my actual deck in real life. It is a little bit different than what I made in the game, just because it has to be, because the game has certain limitations on things like super polymerization. So we're going to go ahead and get into what I actually run in real life, what I would actually run into a tournament. I also wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about the new Jack-o-Bolan card that's going to be coming out with Ignition Assault. That card actually looks amazing with the zombie deck, and I am going to pick up probably a couple copies. I'm thinking the deck I might only run one, just because of it's going to be a very hard card for your opponent to get rid of. So let's go ahead, let's get into it, and then afterwards we will go talk about Jack-o-Bolan. We will talk about what I would side out of the main deck to put Jack-o-Bolan in the deck. Because, yes, I believe he will be a staple. He will increase your deck's consistency quite a bit. And if you want to play zombies competitively, you should use Jack-o-Bolan, I feel like.
Alright guys, first up we have our one-ofs here. So first up we have Shiranui Samurai. We have Shiranui Spirit Master. And I also run Vampire Fraulein. Like, this card is absolutely busted. You should really run Vampire Fraulein. It is searchable off Glow Up Bloom, and it is one of the best defensive cards that you have in your entire deck, hands down. Spirit Master is not amazing by himself, but he combos well with our Shiranui-style Swallow Slash, so that's why we run him there. He can help us break boards. And then Shiranui Samurai, he's okay. His ability is that it's a quick effect, so like if he gets attacked and he activates its ability, he can banish the card that attacked him. So it has some niche use, and I do find myself using him occasionally. Mainly if I just want to trigger Doom King's ability, because Doom King is stupid. Speak of the devil, next one we're going to talk about. We run 2 copies of Doom King Ballardrock. This card is your big boss monster for the deck. It is absolutely ridiculous. Basically, he comes in with essentially a built-in non-targeting negate skill and a built-in non-targeting banish skill. So just having 2 disruptions within the same card that you can activate in the same turn is pretty overpowered, and a lot of decks have a hard time getting around that. Like, you negate something and you banish something. What are they going to do? There's not a lot they can do to get around that. And a lot of games against things like, Solomon Great basically come up to who goes first and who sets their board up first. If Solomon Great goes first and sets up all their negates, it's going to be really hard for you to get Doom King out. But if you go first, in a turn, it's going to be really hard for them to set up anything either. And the same goes for a lot of the other decks out there. I think maybe the only exception I can think of at the moment is maybe Sky Striker, just because the way that that deck works is fundamentally different than almost every other deck in the game. So, moving on. Alright, we run the staple Double Gozuki. Basically, Gozuki's ability is that he helps you unbrick your hand when you activate his ability. You can also use his ability to send any card from your deck to the graveyard. And as you know with zombies, that is huge because all your abilities pretty much activate in the graveyard. This is a graveyard-focused deck, as you would have guessed with Zombie World and zombies. And basically, if he gets destroyed, so like you can link him off. If you have a Doom King in your hand, you can banish another card from your graveyard to special summon the Doom King from your hand. So he does help you unbrick your hand, and that's why I run this, because I find when I play, Doom King just loves being in my hand, and you do not want that. That is the last place that you want Doom King. Next, we go to Mizukis. Mizuki is essentially a monster reborn for the deck. I can sort of see a case being made if you guys want to run 3 Mizuki. I personally wouldn't. I don't think you really need to. I mean, especially if you run something like Book of Life, I just don't see a reason to run a 3rd copy. I find having 2 is more than enough for anything I do. Alright, next, Triple Ash Blossom. This card is your standard hand trap. I think it works really well in this deck. You need some way to interrupt your opponent if you're going second. this is really the best card in the deck that allows you to do that. I mean, you can run more expensive hand traps. I find that they don't work amazingly with the zombie deck, like things like Thanos and that kind of thing. I honestly feel like you should go with Ash Blossom in this deck. Next, we're going to run 2 copies of our Necroworld Banshee. So this is the card, basically, it has a couple of abilities. So its first ability is that when it goes to the graveyard, you can activate it, banish it, so, you know, it's gone, and then you can search Zombie World and put it on the field. So essentially what the general combo of what you would do is you would bring out something like Unizombie, activate Unizombie's ability to toss that in the graveyard, then you'd activate its ability in the graveyard, bring out a Zombie World, and that's how you kind of get your plays rolling. Now this card's other ability is that if it's on the field, Zombie World cannot be targeted and it cannot be destroyed. So this card protects your Zombie World. That's an ability a lot of people also sleep on. That is a really, really good ability. Alright, next, obviously we have to run our triple Unizombie. Unizombie is ridiculously overpowered in zombie decks. Like, it is the best zombie card in the game, in my opinion. Essentially, it allows you to discard a card to the graveyard, which on its own, or from your hand, you know, and on its own, that is very, very strong. And then it also lets you throw a card from your deck into the graveyard, so it's essentially a Foolish Burial. This card is essentially an upgraded version of Foolish Burial. Like, if they don't negate this card, you will get your plays out. You will usually get Doom King out on turn 1, which is what this deck wants to do. You want to turbo out Doom King as fast as you can. Alright, the other card that we run triple copies of is going to be Shiranui Solitaire. Now, Solitaire, basically his ability is that he lets you tribute a zombie card on the field to special summon a zombie tuner from your deck, right? And if you know anything about this deck, you know that Unizombie is a zombie tuner. So this is the card that's your starter. He will allow you to get your Unizombie out, which will allow you to throw your Necroworld Banshee into the graveyard, and essentially Shiranui Solitaire is what allows you to get your plays rolling. And that's why this card is, you have to have 3 of it. Alright, next card. This is a little bit of a hot take. I run 3 glow-up blooms, and there is a very specific reason that I run 3 glow-up blooms. I like to be able to search both my Doom Kings and my Vampire Fraulein whenever I want to. Vampire Fraulein, believe it or not, you know, you can activate Vampire Fraulein's ability in your hand, and so just having access and being able to draw that card, it can sometimes be a lifesaver if you get a really bricked hand. So Glow Up Bloom should be at 3, especially just due to the fact that we're going to talk about Jack-o-Bolan. Jack-o-Bolan is also a card that can be searched with Glow Up Bloom just because it is above level 5. And when Jack-o-Bolan comes into this, if you guys want to play zombies, you know, to their highest level of competitiveness, I highly recommend you run Bloom at 3 just so you can search that Jack-o-Bolan card out. Alright, next card we're going to talk about, obviously we have to put Foolish Burial in here. Card that just lets you discard anything from your deck into the graveyard. It's a 1-of, you can only have one of these in your deck. It's still really strong, so run that for sure. Alright, now this is one of the best cards in the deck. We run triple Super Polymerization because it is one of the strongest disruption cards in the game right now, in my opinion. You can basically fuse 2 of your opponent's monsters into a fusion monster. They can't interrupt the card, and you can bring out 1 of your fusion monsters. So that's really cool. You can clear their board with it. You also have a discard effect with it, which synergizes actually really well with this deck. Like, you know, if you have a Glow Up Bloom in your hand or a Doom King in your hand, you activate Super Poly, you get your card out, you discard your Doom King and he comes back next turn, or you discard your Glow Up Bloom and you use his abilities. Anything with a discard effect actually synergizes extremely well with this deck. So Super Poly is a must. You must run Super Poly with this. Now, we also run Triple Zombie World. The reason we run Triple Zombie World is because I actually have gone through games where, you know, there are very, like, back row heavy decks, and I have gone through games where I've gone through all 3 copies of Zombie World, and if you go through all 3 copies of Zombie World, you're kind of fucked. Like, what will happen is Doom King won't be able to trigger off your enemy's abilities, because Zombie World, what it does is it turns everything in the world, or on the field and in the graveyard, into zombies, right? That also prevents anything but zombies from being tribute summoned. So what this means is, with Doom King's ability, he has to basically chain his abilities, but he can only use them when another zombie uses its ability, right? So Zombie World is the card that allows you to turn all your enemies' cards into zombies, so when your enemies use their abilities, you can chain your Doom King, and you can negate all the abilities they do, you can banish them, so you have to run 3 Zombie Worlds. There's really no other alternative, and I would not cut this card down to anything less than this for any reason. Now, this deck is very weak to hand traps. That's the biggest problem with this deck, guys. So we have to protect ourselves from hand traps in some ways. Call by the Grave is what will allow you to do that. With zombies, I would recommend you always use that defensively. It's always going to be a situational card, but it's what's going to allow you to get off your plays safely. Ash Blossom or Effect Veiler, all that shit is a real problem for this deck, because this deck is a very normal summon reliant deck, and that is the one big flaw with zombies, and that is the reason I don't see zombies becoming tier 1, but it is still an extremely strong tier 2 rogue option, and I would not get rid of I would not cut this card down. You should run 3, because you will regret it if you don't. You will get negated on turn 1, you will hate your life, you will pretty much insta-lose at that point. Alright, now, I run 2 instant fusions, and the reason I run 2, I felt like I didn't really need 3, and it just takes up space. Space necessitated that I cut it down to 2. So basically what this does is when you use it, you activate, when you use it, you pay 1,000 life points, and then you're allowed to special summon 1 level 5 or lower zombie monster from your extra deck for 1 turn. You can't attack with it, but that's okay, because you don't need to. Most of the time what you'll do is you'll go into like Thousand Eyes Restrict, steal their card, and then you'll link it off with something like Link Karibo. Or this card can also be used defensively. What you should do is, if you're going turn 1 and you get this, and you don't want to get, Ash Blossomed, and let's say you don't have Called by the Grave, you'll play this, you'll summon a Millenniumize Restrict, because that's a card that will protect you from hand traps, right? So this can also double as just another way to defend yourself from hand traps, so that's really good. Alright, now we're going to move on to our trap cards. So this is a card that I was running at 3 for a while. Again, space just kind of necessitated that I cut it down to 2. It's a very good disruption card. I felt like I didn't really need 3 copies of it. It was just coming up way too much, and sometimes that can be a problem when you really need something else. And so I feel like running 2 copies has overall better helped my consistency, but essentially what it does is it lets you sacrifice a zombie card on your side of the field, then you can pop 2 cards on your opponent's side of the field, and then you have to banish a Shiranui monster. So when you combine this with Spirit Master, so you'll sacrifice a zombie, you'll send Spirit Master to the graveyard, you'll pop 2 cards on their field, and then Spirit Master has an ability that when it's banished, it can also pop another face-up card. So you can essentially get 3 card destructions by running Swallow Slash. So it's another good disruption card. Back row heavy decks do annoy this deck quite a bit, so I would recommend running these, or at the very least run Twin Twisters if you don't want to run something like this, because you will need some back row removal with this deck. It will come up, trust me. Alright, last 3 cards for the main deck. We're going to run triple Rivalry of the Warlords, just because its ability to stun and lock down your opponent and lock them out of summoning when you combine it with Zombie World is fucking insane. So basically what happens is, this card says that they can only control one type of monster. If Zombie World's up on the field, anything they control is a zombie, so they can only control that one zombie type, which means that they can't summon anything unless it's a zombie-type monster. That is probably one of the strongest locks in the entire game, and the Zombie World Rivalry combo is just broken in my opinion. Alright guys, moving on to our extra deck, we run 2 copies of Vampire Sucker. This card, I would not cut this down to 1 copy. You can sort of get away with it if you want. But, you know, if something happens and it gets banished, you're kind of shit out of luck. But this card is absolutely ridiculous. Essentially what happens is, it's a Link 2 monster. When a zombie is special summoned to your side of the field, you can draw a card. You can also use it to special summon zombies to your opponent's side of the field. So if you have the Zombie World Rivalry lockup, you can special summon a shit card from their graveyard onto the field and lock them out of summoning on the next turn. So that's really broken. And this is so good because you are always having graveyard recursion with Doom King. You are always having cards come back from the graveyard, so you will always draw cards. And as you know, drawing cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is absolutely ridiculous. Vampire Sucker is absolutely overpowered in this deck. Next, we only run 1 copy of Link Kuriboh. I feel like that's all we really need. I would not run any more in this, just because, you know, space kind of dictates that. Next, we're going to run 1 copy of Nightmare Phoenix. Standard utility card. Basically just lets you discard a card to destroy a spell trap on the field. Your other standard utility card is going to be Nightmare Unicorn. That is sort of another pseudo-disruption card. It basically just lets you discard a card to return a card back to their deck. So that's pretty good. Now, I also run Boral Sword Dragon. It really helps basically if you do manage to disrupt your opponent and you get all those negates. Boral Sword is basically what's going to allow you to swing for game on the next turn. Boral Sword can be really good. Alright, next we run 3 copies of Dragon Necro Nether Soul Dragon. So that is our super poly target. I'm probably going to cut it down to 2 and replace one of them with a Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, just so that if Zombie World's not on the field and I have a super poly, I can still use it. Because the problem with this card is you can only make it if Zombie World is on the field. But essentially, its effect is not that good, but it is a 3,000 attack power body that you essentially just get for free. Essentially, it can't destroy cards by battle, but when you attack things, you can make a token of the same attack that that monster has, and it just helps you get monsters on your board. Alright, moving on to our Synchro monsters, we're going to start with our big beater boss of this deck, Shiranui's Shogun Saga. Essentially, when you bring him out, what his ability is that you can banish a card from your graveyard, and then you gain all the attack of that card until the end of the turn. So he can also allow you to swing for games. Shiranui's Shogun Saga is pretty easy to bring out in this deck. You have a lot of level 4 monsters with Gozuki and Mizuki, and you can change the level of things like Unizombie. So that's really good. I mean, you should always run this card. Next, this one's also a bit of a hot take. I run Shiranui Sun Saga, and the reason I run Sun Saga is because of things like Dark Hole and Mirror Force. This card is essentially its ability is that you can banish a card from your graveyard, and you can basically protect your cards from death. And so that's really good. I don't like having to main deck Twin Twisters if I don't have to. So Shiranui Sun Saga can allow me to kind of play through some of those trap cards that people use sometimes that can really be annoying. So that's why I use that. So next, we have our Instant Fusion target, or 1000 as restrict. I run 2 of them just in case I want to use both of my Instant Fusions and like get basically like a double disruption. But what I'm probably going to do in the future is cut it down to 1 copy because I do need to get that Millennium Eyes Restrict, and that will just increase the consistency of your plays so much. So next we have our Red Eyes Zombie Necro Dragon. I actually almost never use this card, so I might cut it out for something different. But basically, what this does is it gains like 100 attack for every zombie card in your graveyard and in your opponent's graveyard, so it gets big. Especially if you play shit like Thunder Dragons, this card will get big really fast. And that can be good in certain situations. I just find that, like, I don't often actually need it, so I don't know. I would almost rather bring out Shogun Saga and like, Boral Sword or something and swing for game, rather than this. But, I mean, it is a decent option. Plus, it comes with the structure deck, so that's really good. Next, we have Cyframe Lord Omega. This card is actually extremely good in this deck. Essentially, it has a couple of abilities. So its first ability is that like he can banish himself on your standby phase, and he also banishes a random card from your opponent's hand. They both come back at the end of the turn, so you can basically make them play a turn without a card in their hand, which is decent. His other ability is that he can basically recycle your banished cards back into your graveyard. And this is why I don't run Book of Life or anything, because if you have Frame Lord Omega out, you can basically just keep getting Mizuki, keep getting that free monster reborn back to your side of the field. The problem with this card is I feel like if you're able to play this card, you're already going to win the game. So I don't see it as super necessary, but it is actually a good card. You should still run it, because you never know when it will come up. Alright, well that is it for the main deck and the extra deck. So starting our side deck, it is not amazing, I will tell you that. I'm kind of still building it, but we're going to run our 3 copies of Twin Twisters. Just have that back row hate. That card will allow you to discard a card and destroy 2 spells or traps on the field. And having back row hate in this deck, and at least having the option to have it in like game 2 and 3 is really, really important. So you should run the Twin Twisters at least in the side deck. Next, we got our Dino Wrestler Pankratops. I would actually run probably 2 or 3 copies of this in your side deck. It's just a decent disruption card. You can special summon it, you can pop a card on the field, and if you do special summon it, he's no joke. He comes out on the field as a 2600 beater, so that's pretty decent. Now, I also run triple wiretap. Basically, if you go and you attack and you don't have any other form of back row removal, wiretap and let's say they activate a trap card when you attack their life points, you can play wiretap and that will disable their trap card. So wiretap is actually pretty good in this deck, especially if you don't want to main deck, your Twin Twisters. So that's decent. Now, I also have Get Out. Get Out in my side deck isn't the most amazing thing, but it can allow me to disrupt the enemy. It almost never comes up for me. But essentially what it does is you can return 2 of your opponent's special summon monsters to the deck. So I will use it on their link monsters usually and return their link monsters that they've played. So that can disrupt some decks, and sometimes that can be a lifesaver, you never know. So it does come up sometimes. If you want to run more than 1, you can. I just only have 1 at the moment. Now, the last 2 cards in my side deck, it's not a complete side deck, so don't judge me too much, but the last 2 cards in my side deck, I run the 3rd Shiranui style Swallow Slash if I need more back row hate. And then I run a Book of Life, just in case I think I'm going to need it. In case I want to, have an extra banish. So Book of Life is like Monster Reborn, but you can also banish a monster from your opponent's graveyard. So it's decent.
Okay guys, taking a look at Jack-o-Bolan here. This card is actually pretty insane. It's like an upgraded Zombie Master. And the reason I say that is because, like, Zombie Master, he let you discard a card, and then you could special summon a level 4 or lower zombie from either person's graveyard to your side of the field. Now, the reason why this card is better than that is because Zombie Master has that limitation of it has to be a level 4 or below. Jack-o-Bolan doesn't have a level limitation on it. So let's say you get rid of their Boral Sword card, you discard a zombie card, you can special summon Jack-o-Bolan, and then during your main phase, you can target a zombie monster, special summon it to your side of the field. So let's say you want that Boral Sword on your side of the field, so you take the Boral Sword, now you can swing for game. You banish this card as soon as you do that, as soon as you special summon it. Until the end phase, and then you banish the monster that was special summoned by this effect when it leaves the field. So this card is going to be a very hard card for your opponent to get rid of. So I think I'm probably only going to put 1 of them in my deck at first, see how it goes. If I need to, I'll probably put 2. This card is essentially, yeah, I feel like it's an upgraded Zombie Master that they're not going to easily be able to get rid of, because you can do it's a quick effect. I mean, you can do all of this on your opponent's turn, and that's crazy, guys. Like, you can interrupt their plays so bad with this, and I think that's going to increase the consistency of this deck by a lot. It's going to increase your power by a lot. Don't sleep on this card, guys, because this card, you're going to be seeing it in zombie decks, I guarantee you that. Now, as in terms of what I would actually replace from my deck, it essentially has the function of Gozuki in the way that I actually like using Gozuki. I don't really use his ability to discard too often to the graveyard. I mean, I do if it's the only play that I have, but I might replace 1 of my Gozukis with a copy of Jack-o-Bolan. If I find that during my testing I need to run 2 copies of Jack-o-Bolan, I'll just replace Gozuki entirely, probably. Because I feel like Jack-o-Bolan allows you to unbreak your hand just as easily as Gozuki. You don't get the discard effect, but you have so many other ways to get into things like Unizombie. I don't feel like it really matters. And if you draw Doom King and Jack-o-Bolan, it's good, because you could essentially discard your Doom King, and then it's just going to come next turn. Like, I don't feel like you lose really any consistency by getting rid of Gozuki with this. So yeah, that's what I would replace, honestly. That is my discussion for Jack-o-Bolan. That is this video. So thank you for watching, guys. If you like this kind of content, if you like this kind of video, please let me know. Please like and subscribe. It helps the channel out. It helps me out. And I like making these videos for you guys, but I like to know that you guys like them as well. So there we are. Alright, I'll see you guys next time.